You go from being anonymous and having a life to being under a microscope like a monkey in a zoo with people chasing you through airports with cameras and running into restaurants as the linguini's going in your mouth. And I don't know that anyone's prepared for that.
Now that Richard Donner's future replacement for Superman 2, Richard Lester, was not so subtly forced onto the set of Superman by the Salkinds, it was time for the production to head to America. In the first week of July, the crew was in Manhattan, New York, where Ned Beatty would appear at Grand Central Station, and many location shots would be performed. Unfortunately, on Wednesday, July 13th, a citywide blackout cost the production $25,000 in losses, and more delays were added to the schedule. To compensate, when power was restored, Donner split the main unit into two, with one filming the boat scenes in Metropolis and the other filming the car chase. For Smallville, Kansas, and the XK-101 missile convoy scenes, Calgary, Alberta was used. The scenery was beautiful, and Valerie Perrine was noted to say, in a southern accent, my, all this and $13,000 a week, too. It was beautiful, but the moment they arrived, storm clouds came, complete with thunder and lightning. Defeated, the crew took shelter in the vans where Ilya Salkind sighed, "Do you know one reason we came to this part of Canada?" The situation just meant that several days were added to the behind-the-scenes tally. When they finally got to shooting, news was coming out of New York that the production left the city with a lot of unpaid bills. Pierre Spengler was tasked to correct this, while Ilya flew to Los Angeles to talk to distributors, dissuading fears, and to work on a trailer for the film. Once again, to cut back, all Niagara Falls scenes for Superman 2 were postponed to save money, and once filming finished in Calgary, the crew was supposed to fly back to England. But another problem arose when the air traffic controller strike occurred, postponing flights. The film was now millions over budget and weeks behind schedule. All filming in America and Canada were pretty much problematic for the production. As the crew returned to Pinewood, it would be Richard Lester who stepped forward and suggested that all Superman 2 scenes slated to be shot be put on hold. He suggested just finishing the first film and worrying about the second later. Everyone agreed enthusiastically. However, there were some Superman 2 scenes still filmed to finish out cast members, like the balloon scene with Hackman and Valerie, to save future expenses. 8 units were made to film scenes, while the main unit went to John Barry's Lex Luthor set. Adding to the problems was that Donner only accepted the best takes from units, and if effects looked hokey or without believability, he would not accept them, thus infuriating the Salkinds. Nearing the end of September, 6 months into the shoot, the Fortress of Solitude set was used to finish Hackman's final scenes in Superman 2. Hackman left quickly, wanting to return home after the long shoot. However, those that remained were the supervillains and of course Kidder and Reeve. To make things look normal to the world, the Salkinds sent out 2-week termination notices to the main crew of Superman, but there was still months to go in shooting. It caused a lot of confusion to the crew, and they began debating if Donner was fired and the film was bankrupt, and maybe Warner Brothers was seizing the film, or they were going to cobble together the footage that they had to make a movie out of it. Some of the crew were elated, though, that their term on the film was finally over, because the original slate for filming to end was when everyone got their 2-week notices. This was why everyone was getting these notices. Alexander Salkind was really doing a ruse to make everything look normal to financial backers and the studio, and was trying to make it look as if the shoot was finished and now they were in post-production. Salkind even put out invitations to the crew that read, "Alexander Salkind, Richard Donner, Ilya Salkind, and Pierre Spengler, and Richard Lester cordially invite you to an end-of-production reception on Friday, 28th of October at 6:15 p.m. until 8:30 p.m. in the green room at Pinewood Studios. Everything was a complete fabrication to fool financiers, and let's not forget the money wasted to send out all these notices and invitations. And not to mention that Salkind did indeed throw a wrap party for a film that wasn't wrapped either, complete with floral arrangements, lavish decorations, a buffet of fried chicken, sausage rolls, hamburgers, hot dogs, shrimp, salads, and 2 huge Superman cakes. That wasn't cheap either, but it was an effective lie to make things appear normal to the outside world. The film would officially take a break to make it look like it was over, but filming resumed at the end of November. The new projection for the completed print of the film was April 15th, 1978. There was a lot of pressure, and to understand this, one has to look at the money issues now compounding from such a long shoot. There were some outstanding bills that plagued the production, like owners of the flying unit equipment, who locked up their stuff unless they were paid. Photo processing of the film was very limited. Outside construction contractors threatened to destroy the Golden Gate Bridge set if bills weren't paid immediately. Even t-shirts for the crew were held back by a freight company waiting for payment. As a result, Warner Brothers Vice President Charles Greenlaw came to the set full-time as an advisor, much to the Salkind's frustration. Units continued the shoot while Donner was in the States for a bit dealing with dental issues and at the same time conferring with Warner Brothers why the film was so behind. He returned in early December to continue his duties. In January 1978, a teaser trailer for Superman finally arrived at theaters, and although simple in its approach, it was effective, giving off the vibe that the film was an event to behold. While filming Christopher Reeve walking through Lex Luthor's trap tunnel at another location at Pinewood, a metalworker named Terry Hill died working near the Air Force One mock-up for the film. The wing of the mock-up collapsed and crushed the man. A collection was taken up for his family, and the spirits of the cast and crew struggled. It would get worse when Daily Variety did a front-page story stating that Superman would not reach theaters in the summer of 1978, but during Christmas 1978. As everything labored on, effect shots were the main focus, from Margot Kidder being crushed in her car to constant flying effects. Reeve was there 6 to 7 days a week like a trooper, and this went well on into May 1978. And when all this was over, Warner Brothers really liked what they saw. They liked it so much they sent Donner a letter saying they thought there wasn't a dull moment in the movie, and he could make his running time whatever he wanted. This was a major positive moment for everyone involved and galvanized the production. Warner Brothers had one request, though. They loved the effect of Superman reversing time in Superman 2, and they worried that if Superman wasn't a huge success, that effect might not be seen if the first one was a flop. So they asked if Donner could put that effect into the first movie some way. After Tom Mankiewicz adjusted the script, the original ending of Superman was changed. That ending had Superman throwing the missiles into space, freeing the trapped villains, who would fly towards Earth shouting that they were free. All this was changed at the behest of Warner Brothers, and this is how we got the final ending you saw in the film. For the score, originally Richard Donner wanted Jerry Goldsmith, who he worked with on The Omen. Goldsmith signed, but when the release date of the film was pushed back, John Williams was hired. Then the date got pushed back again, and Goldsmith was available. But yet again, when the film got pushed back one more time, John Williams was finally hired. Every piece of John Williams' music fits perfectly in this film, and it is as much a reason for the film's success and identity as the actors themselves. And Donner must have known this when he heard the music being conducted.
I screwed up his take because I just ran out on the floor yelling, "Genius, genius, fantastic." You know, the orchestra applauded him and everything.
Filming would eventually finish on October 1978, and there was just 2 months to get it ready for theaters. It was edited fast, and one of the problems for Donner was that he couldn't test rough cuts for audiences because the Salkinds would not allow him to bring the rough cuts to the United States because Alexander Salkind feared Warner Brothers or Donner would steal their film, which was ludicrous since copies of films came from the negatives, not rough cuts. So no screening ever happened. So Donner could not gauge what scenes worked in the film and what didn't. Another historical moment for this film was the Mankiewicz clause, created by this film. Mankiewicz was Donner's right-hand man during production. Although he technically rewrote the script as a writer, he took part in casting, editing, coaching the actors on set, and worked on the scoring. He was always there for him when Donner needed him, and Donner wanted him recognized for this. So he gave Mankiewicz the title creative consultant for the film on the credits when the movie released. This would cause a big uproar in the Writers Guild, and it's best described by Tom Mankiewicz. The Writers Guild sued me in the sense that they called me to a hearing with the head of the guild and everyone else, including Warner Brothers' legal department. I showed them 13 round trips to London after I finished writing. Then it was the editing, the scoring, and I said that it really reflects what I did, and I'm so sorry about the placement of it because I didn't know that was where they were going to put it there, and they said, fine, but in Superman 2, we'd like to correct it. It should come before the writers, which is what happened. That's how that credit came and subsequently outlawed by the Writers Guild. It's called the Tom Mankiewicz rule, informally. There's no such thing as a separate title called creative consultant anymore. Warner Brothers would spend around $7 million on marketing, and with that came merchandising, which included t-shirts, the soundtrack on LP, pillowcases, blankets, Knickerbocker plush Superman dolls, cookie jars, of course the comics, pins, lunchboxes, posters, necklaces, cups, board game, pinball game, match game, Atari Superman game, The Great Superman Movie Book, a highly recommended book called The Making of Superman the Movie, which was one of the books we used for research for this video, and of course, the Great Topps trading card set consisting of 77 cards and 12 stickers. There would be a second series of these cards in 1979, consisting of 88 cards and 16 stickers. One oddity for merchandising was Superman, the Last Son of Krypton, which was a book based on a treatment from 1974 by Elliot S. Maggin. Since Warner Brothers didn't care about Superman, they ignored Elliot's treatment at that time. Then it was bought by the Salkinds. After Mario Puzo showed up at DC, Elliot spent 2 days with Puzo, and they spent much time talking about Superman the series. When Puzo left, Elliot took his idea to the senior editor of Warner Brothers, and they decided to allow him to write a novel which streeted around the film's release. The novel has pictures from the film and some similar ties, but it is nothing like the film in any way, as it's about Lex Luthor and Superman teaming up to find a document by Albert Einstein to stop an alien threat. It's a great read, but it is very contradictory to the movie. And when Alexander Salkind heard of this book, he tried to sue the writer because some of his story points ended up being in Puzo's script. The funny thing is, Elliot's manuscript was turned in a year before Puzo's script, and there was evidence of this. The fall of 1978 was the time of Midnight Express, The Wiz, Halloween, Magic, and the Lord of the Rings animated film. It was also a time for the Star Wars Holiday Special, which aired on CBS on November 17th. But when December came, there were no huge movies that dominated the box office. The week before Superman, on December 8th, 1978, the biggest thing that came along was Deer Hunter. The two other films released beside it were The Brink's Job, with Peter Falk and Peter Boyle, and Harrison Ford in a sequel to The Guns of Navarone. which was Force 10 from Navarone, complete with Bond veterans Richard Kiel, Robert Shaw, and Barbara Bach. There was also a nice surprise part played by Rocky star Carl Weathers. Superman premiered on December 10th, 1978 at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., with Jimmy Carter in attendance. The film was to benefit the Special Olympics, and Donner had no idea how the premiere would go, but at the end of it, the two creators of Superman, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, came to Donner very grateful. What was not advertised to all at that time was that during the making of Superman, Donner had heard that the two creators fell on hard times, and it was Donner who went to Warner Brothers' head of production, John Calley, and told him the makers who created Superman deserved to be rewarded for what they did, and that he wanted them taken care of. Calley agreed, and as a result, the creators received money from the studio analogous to a pension plan from then on. Now, in part 1, we purposely covered that the creators were compensated by Warner Brothers so they could sell the rights to the Salkinds, because there were two sources that verified this. However, in this part, we're covering it again, but with Donner as being the person responsible, because there are three sources. In the end, you're going to have to decide, because we found direct sources and we're not interested in calling anyone a liar, unless there's absolute facts to back that up. So this was the first night Donner met Siegel and Shuster, and they were crying while thanking him profusely for what he did. They were also very happy with what he did with their character. Donner teared up as well. Finally, the Warner Brother executives, who appreciated Donner for his hard work, pulled him to another room and gave him a bronze statue of Superman, made in the 1930s. It was a great night for Donner. For the rest of America, Superman came out on December 15th, 1978, and it was no surprise Superman came out number 1. It made $12 million in its first week, and it stayed in the top spots for the rest of the year. But the drama for this picture was not over yet. 2 days after the release of the film, Marlon Brando publicly announced he was suing the Salkinds for $50 million and demanded that they could not use his likeness. In response, the Salkinds cut Brando from Superman 2, choosing to have Superman's mom in the film instead. Donner criticized their decision publicly. This only created more press for the film as it went into its second week in theaters. During December 20th, the only competition in the box office came from Clint Eastwood and Clyde in Every Which Way But Loose. Also streeting that week was Eric Roberts' film debut in King of the Gypsies. The star-studded Neil Simon's California Suite came out the following week on December 22nd, 1978. Alongside it came the war film Brass Target. Also released that week was the sci-fi remake Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Also released was the romance between Lily Tomlin and John Travolta in Moment by Moment. On December 31st, Ice Castles would end 1978, and it made a healthy $18 million. Superman would end its run, landing the number 2 spot for the year, just behind Grease, making $134.2 million domestically, $166 million internationally, for a final total of $300.4 million. It was an astounding success. Despite all this success, it still didn't mean drama could not still occur. During a Christmas party in Los Angeles at the end of 1978, Pierre Spengler was approached by a reporter named Army Archard from Variety. He had heard there were tensions on the set of Superman, and Pierre admitted as much, but said he was looking forward to finishing Superman 2 with Donner. Right after this, Army called Donner and told him about the conversation, and in response, Donner said this: "Well, if he's on it, I am not." Of course, Army could not help himself. He had to make what was said public, and the Salkinds had to respond. Now, in fairness of the Salkinds, they owned Superman at the moment, and Pierre Spengler was a trusted part of their enterprise. In fact, Pierre was very close friends to Ilya, So when Donner said this, the relationship between Donner and the Salkinds was finally at its breaking point. It was the final straw.
I think I made the right decision because we would have had a lot of problems working together, real problems. Father, we can't work with this guy. It's impossible. So we fired him and we hired Richard Lester.
On March 15th, 1979, Donner was officially removed from Superman 2, stating that his services were no longer needed. This would then cause many lawsuits to follow between Donner and the Salkinds. Not to mention, Mario Puzo was also suing the Salkinds. And the Salkinds would try to sue Christopher Reeve to force him to return to Superman 2. All of this stuff we will go into when we cover Superman 2, whenever that might be. But for now, we're going to start taking a look at the movie, with some behind-the-scene tidbits and deleted scenes, as well as some details you might have missed. First off, the film was dedicated to Geoffrey Unsworth, who was the cinematographer. Geoffrey would die before the film came out, and he was very positive and helpful to Donner. When in doubt about how to do a scene, Donner would lay dolly track and confer with Unsworth, who was always eager to help him. Now, the beginning credits are the result of the teaser trailer. Art Greenberg and associates were quickly hired to cobble together words for the teaser trailer, and Richard Donner liked the style so much that he wanted them to make the beginning credits for the film. The film has multiple themes, and before we go into that, there are 3 distinctly visual styles used. The first is Krypton, which is clearly science fiction visuals. Then, when we get to Earth and Smallville is explored, there is a Norman Rockwell painting aesthetic with a 50s film kind of vibe. Finally, when we reach Metropolis, we get to the superhero story, which resembles a comic, with some subtle humor. All of these sections have completely different styles of filming, and when watching the film, note the contrast as it really stands out, as it's really 3 separate movies within one film. It was Marlon Brando's idea that Jor-El have a Superman logo on his character's chest to connect him with Superman, and in time this would become canon in comics that represented the House of El. Another theme that is prevalent in Superman is the depiction of Superman as a messiah analogous to Christ who comes to Earth to save us, and his father, Jor-El, is a god image. Zod is the devil being thrown out of heaven. The spacecraft delivering Kal-El to Earth looks like the Star of Bethlehem. Marlon's speech, where the father becomes the son, is noted to be a big sign of this messaging.
The son becomes the father, and the father the son.
Tom Mankiewicz was completely on board with this idea, while Donner was not, stating, "I got enough death threats because of that." Speaking of the spacecraft, the scene where the craft passes the supervillains was not in the theatrical cut. Instead, it was in the extended cut of the film later. The little boy found at the crash site was played by Aaron Smolensky, and he would later play the little boy outside the photo booth in Superman 3, though he did not receive a credit for that. Jeff East, who played young Clark Kent, did not discover his voice was dubbed by Christopher Reeve until he screened the film. He was a bit upset by it, and Christopher Reeve later approached him giving apologies. Yet they wanted him to resemble Reeve, and they even resorted to 3 to 4 hours of prosthetic makeup daily to make him look more and more like Reeve as the film went on. The assistant coach here was David Michael Petrou, who was on the set from beginning to end as the novelist covering the making of Superman. If you're a real fan of this movie, I highly suggest checking out that book. Lana Lang was played by Diane Sherry Case. Lang was a character that was close to Superboy in the comics, and she would return in Superman 3, played by Annette O'Toole. Originally, Jennifer Jason Leigh was going to play Lana, but the producers thought she was too young. The football being kicked far was actually achieved by having smart cuts and an air blaster on the ground that shot the football out like a cannon. On the train, Lois Lane's parents are none other than the original Superman, Kirk Alyn, and original Lois Lane, Noel Neill. A crane was used to simulate Jeff East's running beside the train. And East was almost hurt seriously when jumping past the train. The timing for the jump was meticulous, and due to poor timing, he was almost hit by it. Ben Hubbard is mentioned when Clark leaves his mother, and although he's technically not in the Reeves sequels, he is in Superman Returns and is close to Martha. And now that Clark is leaving his Smallville home, it's time for us to leave this video. We really wanted to try to get it to 4 parts, but unfortunately, this is our first 5-parter, as there is still a lot to cover with the movie, as well as things beyond it leading into Superman 2. We will try our best to keep that video under 20 minutes, but if we have to have it longer, we'll do what we have to cover everything. Until then, maybe watch another superhero movie, and who knows, maybe Lois Lane will show up there too.
Oh, we got a present for you.
What?
Kryptonite! Just kidding.
If you like what you see here, please click like and subscribe, and please share if you can. Super thanks also helps a lot.